Today we're delving into what might be the greatest mystery of the Himalayas, the story of the Yeti. I'm deliberately avoiding the term abominable snowman. We'll focus specifically on the Himalayas, where this legend first gained traction. However, I want to clarify up front that I'm not trying to prove or disprove the existence of the Yeti. My goal is simply to tell you a fascinating story about the search for this creature, a search in which some of the best scientists and climbers of their time were involved. Among them was Sir Edmund Hillary, the first person to reach the summit of Everest, and his climbing partner Tenzing Norgay, who claimed that his father and brother had seen the Yeti with their own eyes. Quite intriguing, isn't it? But let's take it step by step. Not so long ago, the Himalayas were a remote and almost inaccessible place for foreigners. They consisted of a few poor mountain nations whose only real resources were their towering, snow-capped peaks. Until the 19th century, Europeans showed little interest in them. However, in the 19th century, as British officials began arriving in India, they were among the first to hear stories about a mysterious creature that lived high up in the mountains. For example, Brian Houghton Hodgson, a British diplomat in Nepal, reported that his servants had been terrified during their travels by the sight of a hairy, tailless, man-like creature. Early scholars who ventured into the Himalayas during those years and questioned the local population about the wildlife in the region often received the same answers: yaks, wolves, bears, yetis, mountain goats, and so on. The scholars curious would ask, "Wait, what's a yeti?" And the locals would describe a humanoid creature with reddish fur and a pointed head. In those days, however, the scholars dismissed these reports, assuming that the villagers were confusing yetis with bears or monkeys. But it's hard to imagine that people who had lived their entire lives in the mountains, familiar with every animal around them, wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these creatures and something else entirely. One of the researchers, Meera Shekli, noted that yetis appeared in Nepalese and Tibetan religious artwork, depicted as part of a hierarchy of living beings. She observed that bears, large monkeys and small Asian monkeys were illustrated separately from yetis, suggesting that, at least in the minds of the artists, there was no confusion between these forms. They were distinctly different creatures. At least one European traveller in the 19th century claimed to have personally seen a captured creature that resembled a yeti. According to what he told Meera Shekli, years ago in India, the late mother of my wife told me that her mother had seen something that might have been one of these creatures. It was in Mussoorie at the foot of the Himalayas. This creature, half man, half animal, walked upright, but was more animal than human, as its entire body was covered in hair. They said it had been captured in the snow and was kept in chains. But honestly, this isn't much of a solid piece of evidence. Hearsay like my wife's mother's mother saw something at the market once isn't exactly reliable. So, in the 19th century, the Yeti was considered as real as mermaids, dragons, and other mythical creatures that ignorant villagers believed in. But the 20th century brought about a change in the way people thought about the Yeti. First, political changes in the Himalayas made it easier for foreigners to visit the region. Second, there was a surge in the popularity of mountaineering. Climbers who had already conquered the Alps were looking for bigger challenges, and the Himalayas provided plenty of that. Consequently, expeditions from around the world started pouring in. Unlike the British officials who stayed lower in the mountains, these climbers ascended higher, to regions where local legends of the Yeti grew stronger. But for the indigenous peoples of the Himalayas, the Yeti wasn't some mythological figure. It wasn't a deity or a mountain spirit. For them, the Yeti was just as real as a mountain goat or a bear. This is why villagers were deeply offended when scientists refused to believe in the Yeti's existence. One of the first people to see the creature with his own eyes was a man named Enna Tombazi in 1925. He had set up camp near the Zemu Glacier on the north slope of Kangchenjunga when his porters called him out of his tent and pointed to a dark shape in the distance. They claimed it was a Yeti. He wrote, "I grabbed my binoculars and looked in the direction they indicated. For the first few seconds I was blinded by the snow's glare and couldn't make out anything. Then at about 200 yards below I spotted the object they were pointing to. Without a doubt it was a dark figure standing upright, occasionally bending down to dig at the roots of dwarf rhododendrons. It stood out starkly against the snowy background, and I saw no clothes on it." After about a minute, the figure disappeared into a clump of dense brush. Later, upon approaching the area, he examined its footprints. The tracks were very much like human footprints, but only 6 to 7 inches long. The toes and the arch were clearly visible, though the heel mark was less distinct. In 1937, another set of unusual tracks was found by a British expedition led by renowned mountaineer Sir John Hunt. The expedition was in eastern Nepal, following the same northern slope where Tombazi had seen the Yeti. At an altitude of 19,000 feet, they encountered 2 chains of tracks that were so human-like that, for a moment, Hunt even thought someone might have reached the summit before him. However, it was later confirmed that no one else could have been in that area at the time. Again, in 1937, another British mountaineer, Frank Smythe, took a photograph of a trail of tracks. However, experts concluded that the footprints were most likely from a bear. But these stories, told not by simple villagers but by respected British sirs, reignited the interest in the Yeti. Unfortunately, World War II interrupted further explorations, and by the late 1940s the Yeti had fallen out of the spotlight. The only exception was in 1948, when 2 Norwegian mountaineers from a Swiss expedition followed the tracks of 2 creatures they believed to be Yetis. They planned to capture them with lassos, but the creatures attacked, knocking one of the Norwegians to the ground before disappearing. The team concluded that they had encountered 2 large ape-like animals. Then came 1951, and with it a surge of interest in the Yeti. While scouting approaches to Everest on the Khumbu Glacier, the renowned British explorer and mountaineer Eric Shipton discovered unusual footprints and took a series of high-quality photographs. One of the clearest images would later become known as the Shipton footprint. These were the first detailed pictures of Yeti tracks. The photograph was published in Popular Science in December 1952. It was at this point in the early 1950s that the Yeti story truly captured the public's imagination. If you enjoy this topic and want to hear more, make sure to hit the like button under this video and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. And so by the 1950s, the world was captivated by the Yeti legend. People were eager to learn more, and the media fed this fascination by publishing stories of mysterious creatures, footprints and strange sightings. It was an era when people had an insatiable appetite for the paranormal as explorers reached the last uncharted areas of the world. With fewer blank spots on maps where mythical creatures like unicorns or dragons could exist, the Yeti became one of the few remaining enigmas. It was in this atmosphere that Sir Edmund Hillary, famous for his historic ascent of Mount Everest in 1953, decided to take part in the Yeti craze. Though Hillary was a skeptic, the allure of the mysterious creature drew his attention. Besides, a high-profile expedition searching for the Yeti would attract the kind of sponsorship and funding that would make any large-scale expedition possible. Hillary's curiosity was further piqued by Eric Shipton's famous photograph of a footprint, which Shipton claimed could belong to the Yeti. While Hillary initially suggested the tracks might have been distorted by melting snow, he couldn't dismiss the excitement surrounding them. Thus, in 1960, Hillary organized his own expedition to the Himalayas with two main objectives: to study the effects of high altitude on the human body and, of course, to search for the Yeti. Hillary's 1960 expedition was not your average mountaineering adventure. It included a diverse team of experts, mountaineers, biologists, physiologists, and even a director from the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. Their journey took them to the remote valleys of the Himalayas, and the media followed every step with great anticipation, hoping for any sign of the legendary creature. In his typical practical fashion, Hillary didn't expect to find much. He believed the stories of the Yeti were exaggerated or rooted in misidentifications of known animals. Nonetheless, the expedition was well funded, and the Yeti search remained a prominent theme, thanks in part to the extensive media coverage. The expedition began by gathering local folklore and legends from the Himalayan people, who told detailed stories about encounters with the Yeti. As they traveled through remote villages, they heard from villagers who claimed to have seen or even heard the creature. These tales all had similar descriptions: a small, stocky humanoid figure covered in reddish-brown or black hair. The creature walked on two legs but could drop to all fours when necessary, and it was said to emit loud, piercing cries reminiscent of seabirds. As the team trekked through the rugged Himalayan terrain, they searched for tracks, and indeed they found several footprints in the snow. Some of these footprints were large and appeared human-like, but Hillary remained cautious, suspecting that the tracks could have been distorted by the natural elements. They made plaster casts of the tracks, but the results were inconclusive. One of the most intriguing moments of the expedition came when the team visited a remote Buddhist monastery in the village of Pangbok. The monks there had long claimed to possess a relic, a scalp believed to be from a Yeti. After much negotiation, Hillary was able to secure permission to take the scalp back to Europe for scientific analysis. The monks agreed, provided that the scalp was returned to them afterward. Hillary's team took the scalp to London, where it underwent thorough examination by scientists. The results were disappointing for those hoping to prove the existence of the Yeti. The scalp was determined to be made from the hide of a serow, a Himalayan animal similar to a goat. The relic was indeed ancient, but it had no connection to a mysterious humanoid creature. Despite this setback, Hillary's expedition had attracted massive attention. The media had followed every step of the journey, and Hillary himself gave several interviews upon his return. In one such interview he remarked, "I never believed in the Yeti, but I admit that the stories fascinated me. The scalp we found is a remarkable artifact, though it's now clear that it's not from a Yeti." Hillary's conclusion, however, did not end the fascination with the Yeti. The stories continue to captivate the public imagination, and expeditions continue to search for evidence of the elusive creature. In the years following Hillary's expedition, other climbers and explorers would report seeing strange tracks or hearing eerie noises in the remote valleys of the Himalayas, keeping the legend alive. One of the enduring questions surrounding the Yeti is whether local myths and legends about the creature might be rooted in actual sightings of animals that were simply misidentified. Some scientists have proposed that the Yeti could be a rare species of bear or a large primate that has yet to be formally classified. In fact, in 2017, DNA analysis of several supposed Yeti samples, including hair and bone fragments collected from various expeditions, revealed that most of them belonged to Himalayan brown bears or Tibetan blue bears. The study, conducted by a team of scientists from the University at Buffalo, suggested that what locals had been interpreting as Yeti sightings for centuries might actually have been encounters with these rare bear species. However, despite such scientific studies, believers in the Yeti argue that the mystery remains unsolved. They point out that the Himalayas are vast and largely unexplored, and it's possible that a reclusive species, whether primate or otherwise, could still exist in the higher uninhabited regions of the mountains. Cryptozoologists continue to speculate that the Yeti might be an undiscovered species of ape or a distant cousin of the Gigantopithecus, an extinct giant ape that lived in Asia millions of years ago. By the late 20th century, the Yeti had cemented its place in global popular culture. It wasn't just a creature that belonged to Himalayan folklore anymore, it became an international phenomenon. In the West, the Yeti made frequent appearances in films, TV shows, comic books, and even video games. Often depicted as a large, white-furred monster, the Yeti, or abominable snowman, came to symbolize the primal fear of the unknown. One such example is the Yeti's role in the 1964 Rankin-based Christmas classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The Yeti morphed into a figure of both menace and mystery, sometimes even taking on a more sympathetic nature in children's stories. Even in the world of tourism, the Yeti has found a place. In Nepal, Bhutan and Tibet, the legend of the Yeti is embraced as a part of cultural heritage, attracting tourists and adventure seekers. The Yeti is often found in local handicrafts, sculptures and souvenirs, a testament to how folklore can evolve into an economic and cultural asset. In 2013, a high-profile expedition to Bhutan led by British mountaineer Mike Alsop again captured the public's attention. Though the expedition's main goal was to climb some of the country's highest peaks, Alsop and his team spent time searching for evidence of the Yeti, guided by local folklore and reported sightings. Like so many before, they didn't find any conclusive evidence, but the expedition brought renewed interest to the Yeti myth. As recently as 2019, new Yeti footprints were reported by the Indian Army in a remote region of Nepal, sparking a fresh wave of media coverage and debate. Although these footprints were later dismissed by experts as likely being from a bear, the global attention they received shows just how enduring the Yeti's appeal is. Today, the Yeti remains a symbol of the unknown. It represents our collective curiosity, our desire to believe that the world still holds mysteries for us to discover. Whether it's through scientific expeditions, folklore, or popular culture, the Yeti continues to captivate our imaginations, reminding us that there are still places and creatures that may elude us, even in an age of technological advancement. As long as there are remote, untamed places like the Himalayas, the legend of the Yeti will endure. It may never be proven to exist, but that might be exactly what keeps us so fascinated by it. The Yeti allows us to hold on to the possibility that the world is still full of wonder, with secrets waiting to be uncovered. If this deep dive into the history and legend of the Yeti intrigued you, be sure to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you'd like to explore other cryptids, unsolved mysteries or folklore from around the world in future videos. And don't forget to subscribe for more adventures into the unknown.